But I see workshop in the one. So I think Okay, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce the speaker, the seminar speaker for the day. So we have Dr. Chandan Kumar, who is an associate professor of finance in the Madden School of Business at Moyne College, Syracuse, New York. He earned his PhD in economics from Louisiana State University in 2015. At present, he's the Finance Program Director, Associate Editor of Studies in Microeconomics, and Editorial Board Member of SM Business and Economics. He's also a fellow at the Global Labour Organization. Dr. Cha's current research explores issues in economic development with an emphasis on corruption, gender, and wealth. Today, Dr. Cha is talking on municipal bankruptcies and entrepreneurship. By the way, he's going to be on campus till Friday, and he's been assigned room number 201 in RV3. So if you want to meet him, either today or maybe over the next few days, please drop by to have a chat with him. Thank you very much. So it's over to you. So we have about an hour or so, and then you can take questions. You want to use the mic, or I give it to you?
I think I speak loud enough, right? Yeah, this is a small room. Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. It's a pleasure to be here at IGID. I was here 6 years ago in 2016, and then I'm here again. So today I'm going to be presenting this work that is co-authored with Swarup Joshi, who is an assistant professor at Loyola Marymount University. As the title suggests, we are going to look at the effect of municipal bankruptcies on entrepreneurship. Okay, so before that, okay. So generally, the idea is that municipal bonds, right? They are known as munis. They are essentially the bonds that are issued by the state and local governments, right? And they are very attractive to a certain group of investors in the US because what happens is that it is exempt from state income taxes in certain cases and federal income taxes, right? And so what happens is that the state and local governments, they borrow money using this municipal bond, right? And then they use that money to provide public services. And their importance in providing, public services and its effect on employment and growth, right, locally, it's been well documented. Okay, so we know that in that sense that municipal bonds are actually a good thing. But when you look at this figure, somewhere in 1980 or 1990, the municipal debt used to be around $1,000 billion. In 2018 or so, it had tripled, right? Almost tripled, right? So what happened is that there is too much debt, right? As you can see from this graph, too much debt was accumulated by state and local governments, and a lot of that is actually coming from local governments. Yeah. So why is that a problem? The problem is that when you have too much debt, right, then you run the risk of default. Okay, and local governments and state governments, they are not federal government. They do not have the unlimited ability to raise taxes. And therefore, at certain point, they might start defaulting. So, for example, in the United States, many states, not even just the local governments, right? Many states have defaulted. 10 states during 1870s and 1880s. There were 8 states that defaulted in 1830s and 1840s. Arkansas defaulted 3 times, and then there were Puerto Rico that defaulted 5 times. Yeah. So, the default is not very uncommon. In fact, it is more common than usually is reported by reporting agencies, because what happens is that many reporting agencies do not consider very small, they do not cover those, right? And therefore it is not reported. But what happens that sometimes, do not just have a default, but the default turns into bankruptcy, right? When simply there is no hope that the local government will be able to pay that back. And what happens if that will happen? And that is what we want to do. So in this case, we there were these high-profile bankruptcies or bankruptcy filings. Yeah. So what happens is that if you are a municipality and you are going through tough times and you want to declare bankruptcy, then it's not automatic. You have to go to the bankruptcy court, right? And when you go to the bankruptcy court, then the bankruptcy court will decide whether or not you should be, allowed to go bankrupt. Yeah, because once you go bankrupt, then essentially the investors get, almost nothing, right? Depending on what is the situation. But if you do not go bankrupt, if your bankruptcy application is dismissed, then of course you are still on the hook to pay for your borrowings. So here, what we can see is that there's a Detroit city that was in County Wayne in Michigan State that filed for bankruptcy in 2013. That was later approved. Then there is San Bernardino in California, Stockton in California, Jefferson in Alabama, and Central Falls in Providence. All these counties or cities, right, there could be different levels. They filed for bankruptcy and they were eventually approved for bankruptcy. On the other hand, there were these 4 cities or counties, whatever they were, like Hillview in Kentucky, Mammoth Lakes in California, Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, and Boise in Idaho. These entities, right, these local entities also filed for bankruptcy, but the bankruptcy court basically dismissed. Okay, so what we want to do in this paper, there is a lot of literature, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about them. A lot of literature actually looks at the defaults, because defaults are a lot more common than bankruptcies, right? And there is a lot of work on fiscal, deficits and all that, right? But there's not much work when it goes to the local government, especially when we talk about municipal bankruptcies. So, yes. Mm-hmm.
So what are the consequences in the sector when there is a bankruptcy, the investors are not paid, but there is no action against them. They are again.
No, that's what bankruptcy means. When the court approves the bankruptcy, then the court will decide, looking at the situation of the municipality, that how much each investor should be paid, which is usually pennies for dollar, or sometimes even zero.
But there is no legal action.
No, that's the legal thing, right? Court is a legal entity, right? So the court deemed that now the municipality is not in a situation to pay you back. And so, yes, you lost your money. At the end, financial market is an investment, right? And when you make an investment, you might lose your money. So for example, let's say you buy Tata stocks today, right? What happens if Tata goes bankrupt? There's no legal action, you lose the money. That will also go to the bankruptcy court, and the bankruptcy court might say that you get 10 paise for each rupee or whatever. That is the legal action in this particular case.
But is the company altogether dissolved as well? So my question was,
not necessarily. There is some kind of restructuring abilities that are provided. Yeah. So of course the municipality is not going to go away, but for the purpose here is that you are investing your money in the bond issued by a municipality, which is a local entity, and that local entity simply does not have the financial condition to pay you back. And when you made the investment, you knew the risk, and the court is the legal entity here. I'm sure that you might have the ability to go to the Supreme Court or High Court or whatever. I'm not an expert there, but the idea is that that's what the legal part here is.
And there's no bailout by the state law.
So yeah, so yes, so in this particular case, of course, there is no bailout by the state court. That's exactly it. Yeah. So okay, so that's the idea. So there is a lot of literature, obviously, when we talk about defaults, right? As you can imagine, whether it's a corporate, right, or it's a government, once you default, right, then your riskiness or perceived riskiness goes up, right, and then you might have to pay higher interest rate, right, if you want to borrow more money. So there's a literature again, mostly from the corporate side, right, or even from the local bonds, right. So that literature also exists from there. But there are very, very few studies that have actually looked at the effect of such, bankruptcies, right, or even defaults on what really happens to the socio-economic outcomes, right? So one of those papers here is that Abbott and Singla, they have a paper that they published in some kind of public administration journal a couple of years ago. And they have looked at some of those things. Actually, we have a paper out of the same project where we actually show, and maybe I should have cited my own paper here, where we actually show that after the bankruptcy, crime rates rise in the area, right? So we show that, and it's part of the same project where we are looking at that what happens to the entrepreneurship. Yeah, that is what we are trying to look at here.
So the previous paper you managed to causal inference that because bankruptcies have happened, that's leading to higher crime rate.
I would like to say so, but so the referees don't agree with that. So we'll see. Okay. So the methodology that we have employed in this paper, that is very similar to this one, right? So we'll see how much you agree with that, okay. So here our hypothesis is that when there will be municipal bankruptcies, entrepreneurship will go down because of primarily two things, right? Well, maybe I'll just explain the main result and then I will say. So basically what we are going to do is that we are going to look at all entrepreneurship, and then we are also going to look at entrepreneurship unincorporated versus incorporated. So in incorporated entrepreneurship, what happens is that it becomes a legal entity, right? And in incorporated entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur, right, the individual and the business, they are two different things. Okay, so if something happens with the business, the individual is not liable for that from his personal assets, for example. Yeah. In unincorporated business, what happens is that there is the business is not a separate entity, right? So if you suffer a lot of losses from the business, then you might have to sell your house and pay for it. So usually incorporated entrepreneurship are maybe going to be a little bit bigger and so on. Okay, so what we find is that bankruptcies are associated with lower unincorporated entrepreneurship. But so maybe I should also make it clear here. I say unincorporated entrepreneurship, I mean entry into entrepreneurship, right? And I will explain how do I measure that. So the idea is that it's an individual, right? That was not an entrepreneur last period, and that person has become entrepreneur this year. So that's what we are looking at here. We have that data, and I'll explain that. We do not find any effect on incorporated entrepreneurship. We also do not find any effect on exit rates of existing business. So I'm going to talk about that. So what is the mechanism? So there are two potential mechanisms that could happen. We are going to focus on financial institutions that extend fewer and smaller loans. Yeah. So that is one. The other mechanism that I could think of is that generally when bankruptcy would happen, there might be like more pessimistic attitude, right? Economic activity might decline, right? And so on. But the empirical methodology that I'm going to utilize that to account for the economic conditions. And therefore, what we are going to focus on is that, and we are going to show that the financial institutions actually make fewer and smaller loans after bankruptcy happens. Yes.
5 loans a year.
Yeah, 5 loans a year, because these are small loans. So many a times when so the data that we have for these things is actually so the Federal Reserve in the US, there is something called Community Reinvestment Act. Yeah, Community Reinvestment Act is basically when banks, for example, right, they are in one location, they will take the deposits from one location, right, but they would invest it in a bigger location, right? So Community Reinvestment Act mandates that every financial institution has to has to invest certain amount of deposits that they gather from a geographical location within that geographical area. And they have to report that data to the Federal Reserve. So that's why we have that data.
But that would mean not lending money, more in deposit.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat one more time?
The purpose is to collect money and then redeploy somewhere else. But for the sake of regulation, you are lending out as loan. The primary business is not of lending loan, but of redeposit.
No, so generally, so think about it, right? Let's say there is a State Bank of India, right? They would want customers everywhere, right? So even in India, for example, these banks will go to the rural areas, right? and they get deposits everywhere, but then they would reinvest that money. They don't want to make loans in the local area because return might be low or likelihood of default might be high and so on, and they would invest in Mumbai, for example. So here the idea is that these financial institutions want to be there anyways, right? And while they are there, now there is a condition that if you are there and you are taking money from there, then you also need to invest certain amount. Okay. So generally speaking, this paper makes contribution to these three important strands of literature. One is that now it's very widely documented that entrepreneurship is very important, right, for the economic development. It impacts innovation, for productivity and economic growth. Then, of course, fiscal spending and economic outcomes. There's a lot of literature there. And finally, role of finance for businesses, right? So there's a lot of evidence there that if you have easy access to finance, then entrepreneurship or businesses tend to do better. Okay. Now, since we are talking about here some kind of financial distress, I will just spend one slide on this. So what actually causes these defaults, right? So as you could imagine, some of these things are very simple, right? To understand. One is that financial management, right? That could be either short term or long term. Sometimes what happens is that these municipalities, right, or local governments, they invest their money in the stock market or somewhere. Sometimes there might be this, unpredicted investment losses, Of course, lack of political will to raise taxes. So, you are providing more and more services, right, but you are not raising taxes in the same proportion. Sometimes actually it might happen, and it has happened at least once, where somebody sued the county, right, or the local entity, whatever that was, and that amount was so high, the court, of course, granted that it was so high that the entity has to go bankrupt. So so there could be so many reasons, but generally these are the main things. Yeah. Okay. So now this data is very simple. As you saw, we barely had 9 counties, right? Out of them, 5 were successful, 4 were not successful. Yes.
Then are you not identifying the effect of exoneration of just either macro for the county and not just macro?
So let's wait, and I will try to convince you that we are trying to, that we are finding the effect of bankruptcy via different ways, via different robustness checks. I may or may not be able to convince you, right? But let's see. Yeah. Okay. So we are getting this data that is very simple. Basically, we are focusing on period from 2010 to 2017. Then the bankruptcy variable. So the bankruptcy variable is a value one. Yeah, it becomes one from the year a local government entity files for bankruptcy, provided it is later approved by the court, right? If it is not approved by the court, then of course it's not a bankruptcy anymore, right? And therefore we will assign that as 0. Another thing that I must note here is when I showed you the local entity, right? The local entity could be either a city or it could be a county, right? Or something. So what we are going to do is that as long as a local entity within a county, right, files for bankruptcy and gets approved for that, then we assign the entire county as 1. So in that sense, you could consider our estimates as the lowest estimates, right? Because maybe the bigger area is not impacted. We are doing that because that's how we are able to merge the data in the patients. Okay. All right, so some other data is coming from current population survey. They provide data annually, right? So what we do is that they ask individuals whether they were employed, they were unemployed, and if they were self-employed. If they were self-employed, then it's incorporated or unincorporated, right? So we know whether an individual was, entrepreneur or not, right? Or self-employed or not last year, and whether he's a self-employed this year, right? So if it was self-employed last year, not self-employed this year, then it becomes 0. If an individual was not self-employed last year, but she becomes self-employed this year, then it becomes 1, right? So that's how we identify entrepreneurship. we are going to control for age squared, gender, race, and education for the individual level controls. That will be our individual level controls. And for socioeconomic controls, we are going to use American Community Survey and Bureau of Labor Statistics. We are going to control for per capita income, unemployment rate, population. So that's all we are going to control for. And this is what our summary statistics looks like. So this number would suggest that for each 100 people, there are 2 individuals. The number of observations for the approved bankruptcies is 3,905. So for this one, and then we have all others for which we have reported. So I don't have much to talk there. So let me talk about the empirical methodology. Okay. So here we are looking at an individual who becomes an entrepreneur, right? So we are specifically interested here from 0 to 1, right? So if an individual I becomes an entrepreneur in county C, in state S, in year T, that is going to be a function of bankruptcy, right? So if a county declared and approved bankruptcy, again, by county, I meant a local government entity within a county. If they became bankrupt, then we will assign it 1, otherwise it will be 0. Then we are going to control for individual level controls, which, as I said, age squared, gender, income, and education. Then we are going to control for county level variables. We are going to control for county fixed effects, time fixed effects, and we are going to control for state year trend. Yeah. So we'll control for quite a bit of fixed effects, which will sort of rule out the exogenous shock, well, not exogenous shock, which will rule out at least, so imagine, for example, let's think about it. Let's say that there was a county, right, that was going through troubled time. There was a county that had some different issues going on, right? As long as it was not sudden, right, and it was building up, then the time fixed effects would address that issue, right? Or certain kind of counties are more likely to go bankrupt, right? That is also not a concern because we have county fixed effects. So this methodology, which is known as staggered difference in difference methods, right? It has certain advantage in the sense that it does allow for certain kind of non-randomness. Yeah. Another thing that you can imagine sometimes, for example, in difference estimates, right? So you have an event, right? And you look at before and after, correct? When you look at before and after, sometimes you could argue it's possible that there was some third event, right, that we did not observe. Yeah. And that third event was correlated with the event of interest. And so the effect that we are observing could actually be spurious if we do not observe the third event, right? In this case, that is also a smaller concern because the likelihood that 5 different kind of events happen at the same time as the 5 different bankruptcies, right? That is much smaller than one particular bankruptcy. So in that case, this methodology allows quite a bit of things here. So I already explained these notations. In that case, one more time, entrepreneur takes a value equal to 1. If individual I becomes self-employed since the last year, else it stays as 0. So if it was 1, still 1, it's 0, right? It was 0, 0, it's 0. Only if it is 0 and 1, then it becomes 1. Yes.
And then the county specific build-up that
Yeah, so shouldn't county fixed effects control for that? Oh, so okay, so yeah, so of course we can't control for county year fixed effects, right? That is not possible. So yeah, so there are a couple of ways I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to try to get closer to addressing that that criticism. We do, however, control for state trend, by the way. So yeah, so let's see. Yes, that there could be. So let's see if I can show you through some robustness checks. I explained what bankruptcy variable is and the fixed effects and all that. Okay. So now let me also show you, through the graph what happens. So through the graph, this is somewhere here there is bankruptcy, right? Before the bankruptcy, this is what the graph looks like. After the bankruptcy, this is for all entrepreneurship. you see that in T+2 it goes down, but then T+3 it is back. In T+1 it does not even go down, right? So we do not see much robust evidence here in this case. Yeah. For incorporate entrepreneurship, we do not see any evidence at all that entrepreneurship goes down, right? Because this is 5% confidence level, right? This is not statistically significant. Neither is this, and then it is actually upwards. If anything, it's in the wrong direction. Yeah. Now, what if we look at the unincorporated entrepreneurship? We see that T+1 it is not statistically significant, but T+2 and T+3 it is highly statistically significant. Again, this is just drawing the entrepreneurship before and after, right? No control variables.
So your null is beta negative for after.
That's correct. Null is
What
beta
about
negative.
before?
So before, why would we expect anything?
There's
right?
no null. Right?
Yeah, there's no null. Yeah, before there's no null. Yeah. So this is what the results look like. Just like we talked about all entrepreneurship, although the coefficients are negative, there is no effect. Yeah. For same thing for incorporated entrepreneurship. For unincorporated entrepreneurship, in the first column we have no controls. Then we include county fixed effects and year fixed effects. Then we add state year trend. Then we add individual and socioeconomic controls, right? That controls for the individual attributes. And what we find is that in all these specifications, the coefficients are statistically significant and they are negative as per our expectations. We also look at exit rates, and you can see the exit rates are never significant. Now that sort of makes, how do I explain that result? So the way I explain these results is that once you already have a business, right, there is some kind of fixed cost or sunk cost. So even if situation might be bad, you do not want to leave the business. On the other hand, if you are going to be a new entrepreneur, you do not want to start the business, at this time. So that might explain that why there is no effect on exit rates, but there's an effect on unincorporated entrepreneurship. Okay, let me just explain what did this point estimates mean. So basically what happens is that the mean was 0.006 for unincorporated entrepreneurship. Now a point estimate is negative 0.004. In other words, after bankruptcy, for every 1,000 individuals who were deciding to be entrepreneur, for every 1,000 when there was 6, now it is only 2. So it is economically meaningful effect that we see here. Yeah. Of course, we do not find any effects on incorporated entrepreneurship. We do not find any effects on exit rates. Now, let's talk about, could there be some unobserved factors, right, that coincided with the bankruptcy filings, yeah, and that also affect individuals' decision to be entrepreneur in the region, right? So one could also think about that, there could be certain macroeconomic factors, right? So when certain macroeconomic factors take place, they do not only impact one particular region, right? They might impact slightly broader region, right? So for example, something that impacts, let's say Mumbai, right? That also impacts Pune at least to a certain extent, right? Or Goa, or so on, right? So that could be one thing. So that would be one way that we could check that. Another could be time. So for example, what you were saying, that maybe something was building up, right? If something was building up in the county, and if that was the something that caused this effect, right? Then shouldn't we also observe an effect a year ago or 2 years ago, something like that? Yeah. So,
Sorry, teacher.
no, go ahead.
So one channel I didn't really understand. So I'm from a particular county which has gone bankrupt. Why didn't I just migrate to another country which is not doing so well?
Well, so you definitely could, but usually what I would expect, right, that you would have to migrate to like some, like you definitely want to have like some space, right? I mean, so imagine if Mumbai goes bankrupt, right? Wouldn't it also have some effect on Pune, for example? Although, I mean, I agree that there could be migration, right? But does it matter for our case as long as we
so
see?
the way you have your data is, if I'm not an entrepreneur and I choose not to be an entrepreneur, 0, 0. Only when I'm switching, it's becoming 1.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
So as of period T, my county has gone bankrupt. So that discourages me from opening a business here right now. why did I migrate to another county which is Meanwhile?
So-
ET plus 1, T plus.
Okay, so I think that is very interesting. So on top of my head, this is the first time I have heard this argument. So my answer may not be perfect, but I can think of one thing, at least to defend my results here. So imagine I'm an individual who wanted to be entrepreneur, right? And I'm discouraged by this, right? And if I leave, so shouldn't that make my estimates the lower estimate, in the sense that these individuals wanted to be entrepreneur, they would have been entrepreneur, but they are leaving.
But you're able to track them on your.
No, I'm not able to track. I'm not able to see whether a particular individual is leaving. So unfortunately, I can't do it.
So are you able to capture based on all of people that you know?
No, I'm pretty sure. No, I'm pretty sure that there was some individual who dropped out from the survey. So obviously, we have only those observations for which we observe the people, right? So we only keep those observations for which we can create that indicator. So if somebody simply dropped out of the survey, then they're out of the. Because this is a huge survey, right? So there are always going to be some attrition in the survey.
But we don't know the reason.
No, we don't know the reason for that, why they are not using. Yes, we don't know the reason.
And this is for the best.
I mean, I wouldn't even, no, so okay, look, so this CPS, right? The survey is, so we are using the survey data for the like sort of the entire US, right? So, I mean, I don't know. So again, I'll give you the same answer as I gave to him, that let's say if some individuals are really leaving that region because they want to be entrepreneur, right? Right? So that means if they had stayed, we would have had even higher entrepreneurship, right? So what I'm saying that these wannabe entrepreneurs are leaving these places, they are going elsewhere. So our estimate should be lower, like it should be biased downwards, not upwards, right? It would be interesting to able to answer that question. I don't know if I can answer that or not. I'm going to investigate, but I don't really know if I can or not. But the way I think about it, it is causing my estimates to go, to be biased downwards, which is good, rather than, biased upwards, and that becomes, it becomes a bigger problem. Yeah. Yes.
The companies which went bankrupt, you know what kind of industries they were, because I'm trying to think if it's the US
Mhm.
and if my client is across the country. Yeah, in these days of etc. I do not necessarily have my clientele in the county where I'm actually doing a business.
Right.
So my county going bankrupt may not have an impact on my decision. My decision to be dealing or doing an industry could be completely different. So unless you're talking of cases where they're in the old age entrepreneurship, where they're doing the brick and mortar stuff, then a lot of these things would make sense. But if I'm into a case where I'm doing any software application where it's not the same, and my county has no bearing on my bankruptcy.
So yeah, I don't think that is a problem here, because two things. One, that yes, the effect that we find on unincorporated entrepreneurship, and those are almost always at the local place. So I'm a plumber, right? I'm not going to do plumbing to plus the survey is done within the county. So you will be surveyed only if you are a legal resident of that survey. Sorry, with that region. Yeah. So if whether or not when I'm surveyed, I'm a legal resident of that particular region. I was a legal resident of that, that particular region even in the last period, right? So in that case, I'm always within that region. So bankruptcy should impact me. It is not tracked if I was sort of. So for example, if I'm from, right, let's say for example I'm from Bihar, right, and I come to Mumbai, right. So I will only be included in the survey of the Mumbai where I reside, and not from Bihar. So in that sense, if Mumbai goes bankrupt, I'm impacted. Bihar goes bankrupt, I'm not impacted, because I have made the decision to leave that long time ago. So okay, so then what do? We look at the time effect, right? So what we are saying is what we do is that we we arbitrarily move the bankruptcy, right, one period ago, right? So if bankruptcy happened in 2013, we are treating as if bankruptcy happened in 2012. So if this was something that was building up, right, then we should have seen an effect here, right? But we don't see an effect. Similarly, What we are doing is that we are now assigning the bankruptcy to the county that actually went bankrupt. We assigned bankruptcy to the neighboring counties. So Mumbai goes bankrupt and we assign one to Pune, we assign one to Goa and so on, right? And we do not find any effect. So we do not find any effect. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I'm asking.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
So when you say T minus condition, then you are just saying the next immediately next, right? As if you are not
previous period, not
you are fictitiously assigning the treatment period.
yes, one period before, yes. And since I still have these individuals there, right?
So you are just looking at the back.
That's correct.
So just thinking maybe this is the second problem. Okay. You also have data on counties where bankruptcy was filed but not.
Mhm.
Can you use that to other principal cases?
Yes, I could actually. I did that. I don't think that I have done that yet for entrepreneurship. I actually did that in my crime paper. So we have that. It is still developing. Yeah. So I could do that, but I could tell you that in my crime paper, we actually do that, and we find that filed for bankruptcy but did not get approved. Crime doesn't change in those reasons. So we are in the process of doing that for this paper. Yes. So we have that in mind. That's a good session. Thank you. So in this case, basically what we are saying is that we at least reasonably can, talk about that the results are not driven because of some unobserved factor that just happened in the broader region, right? Because if it did, then neighboring counties should also be impacted. And we also see that there is no effect if we arbitrarily move the bankruptcy to one period before. Now, another thing that we are doing is that which was actually based on the referee reports on the other paper. This paper, by the way, I don't have a draft yet. Sometimes I just have the presentation before I have a draft. I recently started doing that. So I don't have a draft yet. So one of the things that people said, you have such a big sample, you are comparing this county to all the counties in the United States. You should have a more homogeneous sample. So what we are doing here is that we are essentially looking at all the counties that share the same observable characteristics, right? And then we are comparing only those counties. We find the same results. Unincorporated entrepreneurship is impacted. Other entrepreneurship is not. Since the outcome variable is 0, 1, right? So we also just check the logic estimation, although people usually do this for OLS. So we did that. We dropped all the dismissed bankruptcy states. We find the impact. Actually, we have the result, but I didn't update the table. But we have what we suggested. And then more recently, there is a literature in last 3-4 years. So that's when I realized that I'm always late. This is the time I started to take advantage of this difference in difference, and then I send it, and then I do some Googling and I find out that now difference in difference is no longer, the state of the art, because apparently it has some problems. Okay. So the idea with this staggered difference in difference is that, you presume a couple of things. One of them is the parallel trend assumption, right? So the idea is that the crime rate, or in this case, entrepreneurship, right, would have evolved after the bankruptcy in the same way as it did before the bankruptcy, right? Now we don't necessarily know if that assumption would have been fulfilled, right? People always presume that, but we can't show that. So that's one problem. Another problem that happens in this kind of case where you have staggered, treatment, right? In this case, treatment is not happening once, but it is staggered, right? Different counties are going bankrupt at different times. And in this case, some literature has shown, and I'm not a econometric theoretician, so I can't really tell you why that happens or why doesn't that happen, or I can't follow the derivation in the Journal of Econometrics paper. I can tell you that. What I did follow as an applied economist is that they are basically saying that sometimes in the staggered difference in difference estimator, what happens is that certain groups might be treated more than once. Because staggered, right? You have treatments happening. And when that happens, the staggered difference in difference estimator may not actually be biased, and that might not yield estimates that are reliable. Thankfully, in this AER paper, and I do not, well, I guess D. Chase Martin, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. These guys have this AER paper, and there they propose a method, and they provide you strata code. So, you know, they propose a method that is essentially robust to these two criticisms. Yeah. So when we apply that method, then we find that, you know, estimates become slightly smaller, right? But it is still statistically significant. No, it's not multiple treatments. It's treatments at multiple points in time.
So what would that mean?
So one county went bankrupt in 2011, other went in 2012, other went in 2013, right? So what happens is that the treatment is not occurring at the same time. Yeah. So that means what happens, and again, I cannot tell you the econometrics behind it, but I can tell you the story. The story is happening that in a difference, right? You do, let's say, treatment minus control, right? Yeah. But when you have two treatments, then once you did treatments minus control, and then there might be another treatment minus this becomes control or whatever, and then there's another control. You see my point? And that apparently creates some trouble. That makes the staggered difference in difference estimators, and this is also called two-way fixed effects estimators, by the way.
But in your setup, are these counties contiguous? So
No, they are not.
They are not.
No, they are.
So if my county went bankrupt, and then it would make sense if a neighboring county went bankrupt. That will have effect on my probability of being an entrepreneur. But if a county far away from my county became bankrupt,
right? So then it won't. Then it won't impact you, right? That is where our identification is coming from, right? That only these many counties are impacted. So that becomes our treatment, and everybody else is the control, right? The idea is that when you have these treatments happening at different points in time, then a control group might be treated twice, right?
so I see what you're saying. So one way you could account for this is to consider only those bankruptcies where in the same year no contiguous county was also bankrupt.
So what I did actually, so essentially what we did is that we did drop one bankruptcy at a time. We didn't exactly do just one, because if we did just one, then it becomes simple difference in difference estimate, right? And with that, the problem is that, as I said, you know, with that, the likelihood that your results might be driven by one particular event is much higher than when you are taking advantage of this, you know, different treatments. What we also did, and I'm not going to be able to show you, by the way, here, but in the interest of time, but what we did is that, and I'll just explain that. So what we did is that we ran 2,000 replications, yeah, of the same regression that we are doing. And what we did is that rather than assigning treatment to the actual municipalities that went bankrupt, we randomly assigned that treatment to like 2,000 reputations to different, you know, bankruptcies. And what we found is that when we do that, the estimates are clustered around 0. So in other words, you know, that makes us more confident about our results, because if our results were impacted by something else, then those should also have yielded an estimate that was closer to the number that we get here. Okay, this is a different slide here, but yeah. So that was the idea. Yeah, we should have gotten the closer to this, right? But we find that they are clustered around 0. Now we also wanted to look at the demographic effect. With the demographic effect, what we find is that the impact is coming from Black individuals and not the white individuals here. Yeah, which is not very surprising. And we find that impact is coming from males and less impact is coming from females. Again, that is also not very surprising, because unincorporated entrepreneurship, right? These are most businesses like carpenter or electrician, right, and so on. And many of those businesses are actually run by, you know, men, or, you know, there are quite many actually. I wish I had data on Spanish, because I have seen a lot of, so in the US they call them handyman, right? In India we call it, you know, a person with jugaad, right? They can do everything. So in the US they call them handyman, and I have seen quite a bit of, you know, people like Spanish from that. Now we also look at that in terms of education level, we do not find any impact on below educated individuals. We find that higher educated individuals are impacted more. That sort of makes sense, right? If I'm an educated individual, right, I also have an option to get another job, right? If I'm not an educated individual, I can't get a job, then I have no option but start, business, nevertheless. So that sort of explains. We also find that individuals who are 40 and older that are impacted more than individuals that are less. That also makes sense. If I'm older, I do not want to start a business, or even when I'm going to talk about mechanism, there also it will. Okay. Now let me talk about some mechanism. As I said, we are still working a bit more closely on this potential mechanism. That is very, very preliminary, especially the mechanism. So what we do here is that, as I said, there's this Community Recovery, Community Reinvestment Act. We take their data and we identify the loans that are made in County C, in State S, in Year T, right? And that are going to be function of bankruptcy, right? Whether the county went bankrupt or not. We are expecting that after bankruptcy, the loan would have gone down. Yeah. So we are going to look at both loan amount and the number of loans. Yeah. And then we are going to control for county characteristics. We are control for bank or financial institution fixed effects, county fixed effects, time fixed effects, and state year trend.
But wouldn't this make more sense if you do loan CST and bankruptcy CST -1 or minus?
Oh, so you are saying that lagged effect, that
Yeah.
bankruptcy happened and then
then
next
there's
year.
some.
I think that would be interesting. Thank you. Yeah, maybe our results might be stronger. I'll check. Thank you. That is a very good suggestion. All right, so we focus on small business. One of the reasons is that we also find significant effects only on unincorporated entrepreneurship. That's one of the reasons. Other reason is that the data that we have, we can find the data because of this Federal Reserve, because of this Community Reinvestment Act. They do not only have to do that, but they have to provide that data, and these data are publicly available from the Federal Reserve website. So we get the data from there, this is what it looks like. So when we look at all origination, we do not find any effect. We do not find any effect on all amounts. Then we look at financial institutions that are making 5 or fewer loans a year, and we find that is statistically significant. After bankruptcy, they are making fewer loans. We also find that the amount is impacted as well, right? Above 5, we do not really find much significant effect. In fact, above 5, the origination is even higher. Then we are also looking at gross revenue under $1 million. Let me make it very clear, because I got this comment when I was presenting and it was Yakuza, like $1 million, what are you talking about? That's not a small business. Indeed, it is not. But that's how the data are classified. We are looking maybe if we can get closer to that. But the majority of the loans, the median amount of loan, even though it's under $1 million, the median amount of loan is 10,000. Yeah. So that's a piece of information that I should provide. And again, what we find is that again, origination below 5 is impacted. Here we don't even see the amount below impacted. So we have some evidence that it is coming, it is happening because of the financing channel. We are still working on that. And well, with that, actually, I have finished my talk, in the sense that, just to conclude, we find that, bankruptcies essentially discourage individuals to become new entrepreneurs. The effect is coming because of the fewer and smaller loans that are extended by financial institutions in the area. We don't find any effect on incorporated entrepreneurship. And since I must provide a policy implication, right? So, well, financial management is important, not that you did not know that already, right? In fact, even for, local government entities. So that is all I have. Thank you. And I will take any more questions that you have. Yes.
But you never talked about how this mismanagement was created. It's just a bankruptcy. And you had quoted that it can be because of some bid for losses and some mistake about it. So that's not a part of financial management. Okay.
Sorry, say again, what is not financial, part of financial management to begin with?
Sometimes the municipality costs and the municipality has a bid for loss. So that's.
Oh, you mean, okay, you meant that one, yeah.
That's following from.
Well, I can answer that in two ways. One is that I can simply get rid of that sentence, wouldn't matter much. And two is that in this particular 5 cases, I definitely know that it was not because somebody sued the county. Generally, so these are exceptional cases, right? Somebody, sues and then that causes, the county to go bankrupt. In most of the cases, it is, it is always like financial mismanagement, in the sense that you are spending more money than you are, collecting in revenues, and you are doing that consistently. And at one point, it becomes, something that you can't pay. And at one point, you just realize it and you find it.
Like context.
Mhm.
Adding the context of matters.
No, so of course, when I write the paper, of course, I'm going to write a lot more than I showed you here in the presentation.
Anything else?
Yes. I have to come closer. No, it's okay, it's okay. Look, I teach a class, so I'm used to speaking louder, right? So, okay, so we cannot comment on like, okay, which sector entrepreneurship are investing more. No, well, sort of, you could do that. So you are essentially now saying is that what if there is a finance institution bankruptcy, and that is possible, right? Yeah. So, well, I mean, that is why I showed you that if you move things around a little bit, so a lot of robust mistakes were designed to answer those kind of questions. One. And two, really in 2007, 2017, the sample we have, I don't think that there has been any financial institution bankruptcy of that kind of. Again, I'm talking about the US. You know that 2007-9 crisis happened. That was one of the reasons that we're starting data from the. So as far as we are concerned, we just wanted to look at that. And as far as what kind of entrepreneurship is concerned, we simply wanted the data to answer. All we know is that it is for first self-employed or not. And if they ask it, they don't ask that what kind of business we start, except for whether it's unincorporated or. Yeah, sure. I mean, in one paper you can answer the one question. You can't answer all the questions. So yeah. Any other questions?
That's for my clarity.
Sure.
So, how many companies we have?
Yes, 9 of them had 5 for bankruptcy.
And how many companies?
Total, I think about 3,000 or something, like including the time.
The proportion of bankruptcies in the sense that variation that you're looking at. So it's say 10 upon 3,000.
So yeah, so I said no because so the way we are trying so as you can see right, our different time variable is individual, right? Yeah. So we are looking at the individual level data. We are controlling for individual level variables. The way we are doing, we are trying. So that's why we did the propensity score match, right? Because we wanted to keep the groups more.
But the variation that you get from the bankruptcy variable, if you're trying to explain what is whether bankruptcy is getting done or not, but you have some sufficient variation in your bankruptcy.
Yeah, well, definitely, right? I mean, when you look at the effect of a policy change, right? Demonetization happened. What happened on the road?
But you could be having multiple county year periods, right? Because you're observing the same individual multiple periods before the bankruptcy and after the bankruptcy. Is that right?
No, the idea isn't the idea behind difference in different kind of methodologies simply that you have one event. As long as you have enough number of observations before and after, right? You can tease out the right? So in this case, I have 5 of those rather than just one, right? So I have yes. So essentially what happens is that well, accounting for the time, right? So I have 0, 0, 0s, right, for these 5 counties and 1, 1, 1s after the bankruptcy, right? For others, I have all 0, 0, 0s. Yes. And then I'm just looking at the individual attributes and then other county, whatever, attributes. And then I'm comparing whether those people who are living in the counties that went bankrupt, conditional on their individual attributes and other county characteristics, are they more likely or less likely to win?
If there are enough instances of bankruptcies, I mean, to say that this is
I would think so. That's why I think we find an effect, right? And as I said, in this kind of policy effect, right? Your policy effect just happening once, right? And then you're just comparing. So even just 1, 0, 1, as long as you have enough observations before and after, right? I mean, that's how difference in different systems.
Actually, Abhishek, the standard is for individuals, not for companies. So if you have sufficient agility over individuals, you are safe.
so. And I mean, this doesn't happen.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah.
When you that let's say when you stick this history aside, you generate a random number, 0, 1. Then you just write a random. So which I mean, you just say random 0, 1. You draw from thing. You have 50% chance of being staying in a.
No, I don't think so. What we do is that I think the number of actual bankruptcies we have, right? We can only assign those many bankruptcies.
Exactly, that's the point.
Yes.
So that's the point of asking the question that what variation did you have and when you had that robustness check? So how did you do that?
Possibly you kept the distribution is the same when you were doing that. Check is what we said to us. So the distribution that you have right now is the data set. You can do that.
Yes. Yeah.
As better.
Yeah.
How did that I mean,
Oh, well, okay. So how do I do that? There's a setup code for that. I don't remember that. I also don't remember that because the other co-author did that. But if you're interested in the setup code, I can give you. If you write me, I can give that to you. It is actually quite a lot of people use that, so it's easy to do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
So once again, if you want to meet him, he will be in room 201 R23 till Friday. Okay.
Or you can email me. Well, it's actually very easy. Somebody pointed out to me. My email is like Jack. It's not Jack, but Jack, because my last name is Jha, and then Chandan C.K. Kumar. So it's Jack. Not Jack. Jack at Moyne.edu. So it's easy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So leave it, should I disconnect it?
I think they will do it.
Okay, okay, perfect.
I think
Yeah, I think that's.